The night stretched endlessly across a lonely back road in the heart of Texas Hill Country. The rain was steady, not a furious storm, but the kind of quiet drizzle that seemed to seep into your bones, damp and unrelenting. Jake Miller gripped the wheel of his beat-up Ford Explorer, the windshield wipers squeaking with every pass. He was a man who had never known luxury, never had much handed to him. Life had taught him to grind his teeth, put his head down, and keep moving forward. It had been 3 years since his wife passed away. 3 years of trying to raise his son Noah alone. 3 years of sleepless nights, double shifts, and a hollow ache that refused to leave. He wasn't bitter. He couldn't afford bitterness. He was simply tired. Bone-deep, soul-aching tired. That evening, Jake had finished a long, back-breaking shift at a distribution warehouse on the edge of San Antonio. His shoulders were sore, his hands carried the sting of tiny cuts, and his lower back pulsed like it always did after too many hours hauling pallets. The only thing on his mind was getting home, tucking Noah into bed, and drinking a hot cup of chamomile tea before collapsing onto the couch. But life never ran smooth. His gas gauge, stubbornly low for days, finally hit the red. He sighed, muttered a curse under his breath, and steered off toward a dimly lit gas station that sat like a ghost by the roadside, its neon sign half burned out. The place looked almost abandoned. The cracked pavement shimmered with rainwater, stained with old oil spills. Jake pulled up beside pump number 4 and shut off the engine. The soft snores of 6-year-old Noah came from the back seat. The boy was curled up, hugging his green-stuffed dinosaur like it was a lifeline. Jake smiled faintly, his exhaustion easing for just a moment. He opened the door and stepped into the chilly drizzle. The air was sharp, clean, almost metallic. As he grabbed the pump handle, a flicker of movement caught his eye near the corner of the shuttered convenience store. At first, he thought it was just a soaked duffel bag abandoned against the wall, but then it shifted. Slowly, hesitantly. Jake squinted through the rain, his pulse quickening. There, beneath the overhang, was a young woman. Her blonde hair hung in wet, tangled strands that shielded her face. She sat hunched in a wheelchair, her hands trembling as they clutched the armrests. A thin blanket, soaked through, clung to her legs, which lay motionless. Jake froze. For a heartbeat, he considered turning away. It wasn't his business. Lord knew he had enough on his plate. But something about the sight, the fragility of her frame, the way she tried to make herself invisible, stabbed at him. And then he noticed something else, her stomach, round, pregnant. The reins slid down the back of his neck as he stared, torn between hesitation and instinct. Finally, instinct won. He closed the gas cap, tugged his jacket tighter, and walked slowly toward her. "Ma'am," he called softly, not wanting to scare her. "You okay out here?" Her head jerked up. Wide blue eyes, red-rimmed from crying, locked onto his. She flinched, pulling the blanket tighter across her belly. "Please," she whispered, her voice ragged. "Leave me alone. I don't want trouble." Jake stopped a few feet away, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said gently. "My kid's in the car, asleep. I couldn't ignore you sitting out here in the rain." She studied him with wary suspicion, like a cornered animal weighing fight or flight. But she couldn't fight, and she couldn't flee. Her body was too fragile, her chair too heavy. And then, suddenly, her strength seemed to give out. She slumped sideways, her thin arms sliding off the chair. Jake darted forward and caught her before she hit the pavement. She was so light it startled him, like the rain had washed the weight right out of her. "Easy, I've got you," he murmured, carefully setting her upright again. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She squeezed her eyes shut, lips trembling. Without thinking, Jake shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. For a long moment, the only sounds were the hiss of rain and the faint hum of the fluorescent light above them. "What's your name?" Jake asked finally, crouching so his gaze met hers. She hesitated, as if even her name was too much to give. Then, barely audible, "Anna." "I'm Jake," he said, "and that little guy in the car is my son Noah. We don't have much, but we've got a dry house. Some soup on the stove, you'd be welcome." Anna shook her head weakly. I don't want to be a burden. I don't have anywhere to go." The words hit Jake hard. He knew what that kind of hopelessness felt like. The hollow nights after his wife's death, when the future seemed like a dark tunnel with no exit. "You wouldn't be a burden," he said firmly. "Look, our place isn't fancy, but it's warm, and my boy would love someone new to talk to. You don't have to decide now. Just don't sit out here and freeze. Anna's eyes filled with silent tears. She bit her lip, torn between fear and desperation. Finally, with the smallest of nods, she gave in. Jake carefully wheeled her toward the explorer. As he opened the door, Noah stirred awake. His sleepy eyes blinked at the sight of Anna. "Daddy?" he mumbled, clutching his dinosaur. "Who's that lady?" "She's a friend who needs some help," Jake answered, tucking the blanket tighter around his son. Noah nodded, satisfied, and drifted back to sleep. The drive home was quiet. Anna stared out the rain-streaked window, clutching Jake's jacket close. Her expression was a mixture of exhaustion, fear, and something else, like she was bracing for another blow from the world. Jake's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. He didn't know why fate had put her in his path, but deep down he felt that turning away had never been an option. By the time they reached his small rental house on the edge of town, dawn was pushing back the darkness. The place was nothing special, peeling white paint, a sagging porch, a yard that could have used a mower. But to Jake, it was home. He helped Anna through the doorway, the scent of wood smoke and stale coffee greeting them. Noah curled up on the couch, still asleep. Jake hurried to the kitchen, set a pot of water to boil, and rummaged for crackers and a can of chicken noodle soup. When he returned, Anna was sitting quietly in the living room, staring at the photos on the wall. Snapshots of Noah at the park, messy birthday cakes, a faded wedding picture of Jake and his late wife. "Here," Jake said, offering her a mug of tea. Her hands trembled as she wrapped around it, letting the steam warm her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me," Jake replied, settling into the chair across from her. Sometimes all a person needs is someone to stop and care. For the first time, her gaze softened. The fear didn't vanish, but it eased. And in that quiet kitchen with the rain still pattering on the roof, something fragile yet undeniable sparked between a weary single father and a young woman who had lost nearly everything. Neither of them could have guessed that this chance encounter, this late-night stop at a forgotten gas station, would change their lives forever. Morning came quietly to Jake Miller's small Texas house. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, leaving the air heavy with that earthy, damp smell that only follows a long storm. The sun hadn't fully pushed through the clouds yet, and the kitchen clock ticked loudly in the stillness. Jake sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee gone lukewarm. He hadn't slept much. After helping Anna settle into the small guest room, barely more than a storage space with an old quilt and a dresser that leaned to one side, he had sat at the table for hours, listening to the creak of the house and the faint sound of her restless breathing through the wall. He wasn't the type to bring strangers home, but last night, watching her shiver in the rain, he couldn't have done anything else. And now, with the morning light creeping in, the weight of what he'd taken on pressed heavily on his shoulders. The patter of small feet broke his thoughts. Noah, hair sticking up in every direction, padded into the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas. His eyes were bright, full of the innocent curiosity only kids could carry. "Daddy," he whispered loudly, tugging on Jake's arm. "Is the lady still here?" Jake smiled faintly. "Yeah, buddy, she's resting." Noah's grin widened. "Can I say good morning?" Jake hesitated. He wanted to give Anna space, but he knew Noah's enthusiasm was unstoppable. "All right," he said finally, "but be gentle. She had a rough night." The boy scampered down the hall before Jake could add another warning. He sighed, drained the last sip of bitter coffee, and followed. Anna was awake, propped against the pillows with the quilt pulled to her chest. The morning light filtered through the blinds, soft and forgiving. Her hair was still damp from the night before, strands of gold clinging to her cheeks. Noah burst into the room, grinning. "Good morning." For a moment, Anna looked startled. Then slowly her lips curved into a tired but genuine smile. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice still raspy. "Are you hungry?" Noah asked. "Daddy makes really good toast with butter, sometimes jelly too." Anna let out a faint laugh, light, fragile, but real. "Toast sounds wonderful." Jake leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, watching the exchange. Something inside him loosened at the sound of her laugh. "Come on, champ," he said, ruffling Noah's hair. "Let's give her a minute and get that toast going." In the kitchen, the smell of butter melting on bread soon filled the air. Jake worked the old toaster while Noah hovered, eager to help. A few minutes later, he carried a plate to Anna's room. The toast was uneven, one piece slightly burnt, but her smile when she took it made it feel like a feast. "Thank you," she whispered, nibbling carefully. Jake pulled a chair close to her bed. "You don't have to thank us. You're safe here. That's what matters." Her eyes flicked to his, then down to her lap. Safe, she repeated, almost like she didn't believe the word belonged to her. Over the next few days, Anna began to blend, awkwardly at first, into the rhythm of the house. Jake still left early for the warehouse, working long hours, but whenever he came home, he found signs of her presence. Sometimes she sat with Noah at the kitchen table, helping him with his spelling words. Other times she folded laundry slowly, carefully, her hands shaking as she tried to prove useful. From her wheelchair, she couldn't do everything, but she did what she could, and Jake noticed. He noticed the soft way Noah leaned into her when she read him bedtime stories. He noticed how her laugh, hesitant at first, had begun to sound less like something borrowed and more like something real. Yet questions burned at the back of his mind. Who was she really? Where had she come from? Why was she alone, pregnant, and stranded at a gas station in the middle of nowhere? He wanted to ask, but each time he caught the guarded look in her eyes, he held his tongue. He knew what it was like to carry grief you couldn't put into words. One evening after a long day, Jake found her sitting on the porch, a blanket draped across her lap, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of amber and violet. "You okay?" he asked, stepping onto the creaky boards. She jumped slightly, then forced a smile. "Yes, just remembering." Jake sat beside her in silence. The quiet stretched comfortably between them, filled only by the hum of cicadas and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Finally, he said, "I don't mean to pry, but what I saw that night at the gas station, it hasn't left my head. You were out there, soaked, alone. That's not something anyone should face by themselves." Her hands tightened on the armrests. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a low voice, she said, "I wasn't always like this. A year ago, I was in a car accident, broke my back. The doctor said walking again was unlikely. And then, when I found out I was pregnant, the people I thought would stand by me didn't. My boyfriend left. My parents, they couldn't accept my choices. I was a disappointment, a burden." Her voice cracked on the last word. Jake's chest tightened. He knew that word too well. "Anna," he said quietly, "you're not a burden. Not to me, not to Noah. What I saw that night wasn't weakness. It was strength, even if you didn't feel it." Wow. Her eyes widened, startled by his conviction. For the first time, she didn't look away. The days passed, stitched together by small routines that began to feel like something more. Anna became Noah's confidant, his storyteller, his partner in laughter. And slowly she became Jake's reminder that maybe, just maybe, life still had room for second chances. But the peace was fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. It was a Sunday afternoon when the sound of an engine broke the stillness. Jake stepped outside, wiping grease from his hands after fixing the mower. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop at the edge of his driveway. Two men in suits climbed out, their polished shoes absurd against the gravel. Jake's gut tightened. Nothing about them said neighbors. One of the men, tall, with slicked back hair, offered a thin smile. "Good afternoon. We're looking for a young woman, blonde, pregnant, about yet high." He gestured with his hand. "Her name's Anna." Jake felt his pulse spike. He didn't need to glance back at the house to know Anna had heard. The faint creak of the floor inside told him she was retreating, hiding. "And who wants to know?" Jake asked flatly. The second man pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Her family is concerned. She's been missing for weeks. We're just here to make sure she's safe." Jake didn't buy it. Not for a second. Their eyes were too sharp, their smiles too rehearsed. These weren't concerned relatives. These were hunters. Behind him, the screen door creaked. Anna stood in the doorway, pale as chalk, her hands gripping the frame. "Miss Whitmore," the taller man said smoothly, relief washing over his face. Finally, Jake's mind reeled. Whitmore. The name echoed in his memory, faint but familiar. Big money, big influence. Anna's lips trembled. "Don't call me that," she whispered. "Your father is very worried," the man continued. "He wants you home, where you belong." Jake stepped forward, his voice sharp. "She's not going anywhere. Not if she doesn't want to." The men exchanged a glance. One of them placed a business card on the porch rail. "We'll be in touch," he said. "This isn't over." They left as quickly as they'd come, their SUV vanishing in a plume of dust. But the silence they left behind was suffocating. Inside, Anna collapsed into a chair, her breathing ragged. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't let them take me." Jake crouched in front of her, gripping her trembling hands. I won't. Not now, not ever. But as he held her gaze, the truth settled heavy in his chest. The storm they'd both been out running had finally caught up to them. The black SUV was gone, but its shadow lingered long after the dust had settled on Jake Miller's driveway. Inside the house, the air felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Anna sat at the kitchen table, pale and shaken, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. Noah, picking up on the tension in his innocent way, peered up at Jake. Daddy, who were those men? Jake crouched down, ruffling his son's messy hair. Nothing you need to worry about, champ. Why don't you go play with your dinosaurs in your room for a bit? Noah hesitated, glancing back at Anna, then nodded and padded off down the hallway. His small footsteps faded, leaving only the creak of the old refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall. Jake sat across from Anna. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He let her breathe, let her find the strength to lift her eyes. When she finally did, there was a storm in them. Fear, guilt, and something else. Exhaustion. I should have told you, she whispered. About what? Jake asked quietly, though part of him already knew. She exhaled shakily, fingers twisting in the edge of the quilt Noah had draped around her shoulders earlier. My last name isn't just Anna, it's Whitmore, Anna Whitmore. My father is Charles Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore and Finch Holdings. She let out a bitter laugh, though it carried no humor. I used to be his protege, the youngest executive he ever pushed into the spotlight. I lived in glass towers, sat in boardrooms full of gray-haired men, made decisions worth millions, while never having the right to make a single decision about my own life. Jake leaned back in his chair, absorbing the weight of her words. The name rang familiar now. He remembered seeing it in the business section of the newspaper. Stories about mergers, headlines about wealth and power. And here she was, sitting in his modest kitchen, her hair damp, her hands trembling, her entire body braced like a soldier expecting an ambush. So those men, they work for him, she said quickly. Or for Derek, my ex. He's the son of one of my father's closest partners. On paper, we were perfect. A golden couple for the glossy magazines. But Derek was cruel, selfish. And when I told him I was pregnant, he didn't react like someone who wanted to be a father. He called it a complication, a liability. He said the only reason to move forward was for the sake of the company's image. My father agreed. Her voice cracked, anger bleeding into grief. They wanted me to marry him anyway. Smile for the cameras, pretend it was love, even if it killed me inside. Jake's jaw tightened. The thought of someone treating her like that, treating any woman like that, ignited a protective fury deep in his chest. So you ran, he said softly. Anna nodded, her eyes glistening. The accident happened not long after. I was driving myself away, trying to escape, when another car hit me. Spinal injury. Doctors said walking again was unlikely, and in my father's eyes, that was it. I wasn't just inconvenient anymore. I was disposable. Her words hung in the air like shards of glass. Jake reached across the table, covering her cold hand with his warm, calloused one. Anna, listen to me. You are not disposable. Not to me, not to Noah, and definitely not to that baby. Her lips trembled, and she turned her face away to hide the tears welling in her eyes. For the next several days, life at the Miller house balanced precariously between fragile peace and the looming threat of disruption. Jake still went to work at the warehouse, but he found himself more distracted than usual, constantly checking his phone, worried that another black SUV might show up while he was gone. Anna tried to help wherever she could. From her wheelchair, she folded laundry with slow, deliberate movements. She helped Noah with his reading, her soft voice making each story feel alive. She even insisted on chopping vegetables for dinner, though Jake quickly intervened when she nearly nicked her finger. You don't have to do all this, Jake told her one evening as she struggled to peel potatoes. Her eyes flashed with quiet determination. I need to. I can't just sit here while you do everything. I have to prove I'm not. She trailed off, the unspoken word heavy in the silence. A burden, Jake supplied gently. Anna's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. You're not, he said firmly. You're part of this house now. That's enough. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed him to take the peeler from her hands. It was a small surrender, but it felt monumental. At night, after Noah was tucked in, Jake often found Anna on the porch. She liked to sit there under the Texas sky, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the horizon as if waiting for something or someone to appear. One night he joined her, handing her a mug of hot cocoa. "You always sit out here," he remarked, easing onto the step beside her. "It's quiet," she said, her voice thoughtful. "And out here, under the stars, I almost feel normal. Not Anna Whitmore, the runaway heiress, not the girl in the wheelchair, just me." Jake studied her profile, the way the moonlight traced the curve of her cheek, the strength hidden in her delicate features. "I like just you," he said quietly. Her breath hitched, and for a moment their eyes met. It was fleeting, fragile, but powerful enough to leave them both unsettled. The next Sunday, Jake decided to bring Anna and Noah to the town's farmer's market. He worried she might feel self-conscious, but he also knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. The market was alive with small-town charm, stalls of homemade jams, fresh bread, baskets of peaches, and jars of honey. Children darted between tables, laughter filling the air. At first, Anna sat stiffly in her chair, her eyes flicking nervously from face to face. But the townsfolk greeted her with warmth. A vendor offered her a sample of fresh strawberries. A grandmotherly woman admired her blonde hair and insisted she take a bouquet of sunflowers. Noah, of course, pulled her from one stall to the next, proudly introducing her as if she were already family. Slowly, Anna's shoulders relaxed. She even laughed when Noah smeared peach juice all over his chin. For a moment, Jake saw a different side of her. A woman not defined by tragedy or fear, but someone capable of joy. That night, back at the house, Anna sat on the porch again, a vase of sunflowers beside her. Jake leaned against the railing, watching her. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For giving me a place. For treating me like more than my name or my chair. For letting me be part of this." Jake swallowed, his chest tightening. "You don't have to thank me. What you bring to this house, what you bring to Noah, means more than you know." Her eyes shimmered in the fading light. She looked as if she wanted to say more, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "It's been a long time since I felt like I belonged anywhere." And in that quiet, under the wide Texas sky, Jake realized something he hadn't felt in years: hope. But just as the fragile threads of belonging began to weave themselves around them, the outside world pushed back. Late one evening, as Jake locked up the workshop in his shed, he noticed a plain white envelope slipped under his front door. He picked it up, frowning. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words cut from newspaper clippings and glued in place. "V-turn, or someone gets hurt." Jake's grip tightened, the paper crumpling in his fist. His stomach turned cold. Whoever had sent it knew where they lived, and they weren't playing games anymore. When he showed it to Anna, her face drained of color. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's Derek. It has to be." Jake clenched his jaw. He'd faced hard times before, but this was different. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about Noah, about Anna, about the baby she carried. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "They want to fight? Then they've come to the wrong house." Anna's eyes searched his, torn between fear and relief. "Jake, I don't want you or Noah caught in this." He shook his head. "We already are. But we'll get through it. Together." And though the night outside was still, a storm had begun to gather. One that neither of them could avoid. The note lay on the kitchen table like a snake coiled to strike. Its jagged letters, clipped from magazines and glued together, seemed almost childish, except for the threat that pulsed through every word: return, or someone gets hurt. Jake had seen a lot of bad in his 38 years, but this was different. This was deliberate, calculated. A warning meant to break them before the fight even began. Anna sat across from him, pale and trembling, one hand protectively resting on her stomach. The soft glow of the overhead light made the fear etched in her features impossible to hide. "It's Derek," she whispered. "I know it. This is his way of telling me he can reach me anywhere." Jake's jaw clenched, muscles in his neck taut. "Then he's underestimating me." Her eyes flicked up to his, shimmering with both gratitude and terror. "Jake, you don't understand him. Derek isn't just some spoiled man playing at power. He's vindictive. He likes control. He'll do anything to win, even if it means hurting people who had nothing to do with this." Jake leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Let him try. I've lost enough in this life. I won't lose you. I won't let Noah get dragged into his mess." Anna's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time since she had met him, she saw not just the tired, decent man who had offered her shelter on a rainy night, but the steel underneath, the quiet, immovable strength of someone who had carried grief and still chosen to stand tall. For 2 days, they heard nothing. The tension grew heavier, the silence almost unbearable. Jake caught himself double-checking the locks, watching cars that passed too slowly, and keeping a baseball bat by the front door. On the third night, it happened. Jake had just tucked Noah into bed. The boy's soft snores drifted from down the hall, his green stuffed dinosaur clutched under his arm. Anna was sitting in the living room, leafing distractedly through one of Noah's picture books, though her eyes weren't really on the pages. Then came the sound. Tires on gravel. The crunch was deliberate, slow, like someone savoring each second. Jake's stomach tightened. He moved to the window and peered through the curtain. A sleek black Cadillac Escalade sat in his driveway, headlights cutting sharp beams through the dark. Jake didn't need to see the driver to know. "It's him," Anna breathed, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Jake turned toward her, calm but commanding. "Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone but me." She started to protest, but the look in his eyes silenced her. He grabbed the bat, squared his shoulders, and stepped out onto the porch. The night air was thick, heavy with the smell of dust and gasoline. The Escalade's engine hummed before cutting off. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Derek Whitmore. He was everything Jake expected him to be. Sharp suit, slicked back hair, cologne strong enough to choke the night air. His smirk was polished, rehearsed, the kind of smile meant to charm investors, not comfort loved ones. "Well," Derek drawls, spreading his arms theatrically, "the rumors are true. My runaway bride-to-be found herself a new savior." His gaze flicked over Jake, disdain dripping from every word. And what a savior he is. A warehouse worker. How poetic. Jake tightened his grip on the bat, but didn't rise to the bait. "You're not welcome here." Derek chuckled, low and dangerous. "Oh, I think I am. See, Anna belongs to me. She may have forgotten, but there are contracts, commitments, expectations. Her father and I made sure of that." "She's not property," Jake snapped. "She's a person. She makes her own choices." Derek's smile faltered for the first time, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. He stepped closer, his expensive shoes crunching against the gravel. "Do you know who you're talking to, Miller? Do you have any idea the kind of power I hold? With one phone call, I could bury you. Your job, your house, your custody of that little boy, gone." Jake's chest tightened, but he didn't flinch. "Try me." Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Anna rolled onto the porch, her blanket slipping from her shoulders. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "Stop, Derek, enough." His eyes lit up when he saw her, like a predator spotting prey. "Anna, there you are. You've caused a lot of trouble, darling. Time to come home." Her chin lifted. "Home? That was never home. You and my father tried to build a cage and call it family. I won't go back. Not now, not ever." Derek's expression hardened, his jaw twitching. "Think carefully, Anna. You're carrying my child." "It's not your child," she cut in, her voice shaking with fury. "It's mine to protect. And you will never be part of her life." For a moment, silence stretched across the porch, thick and suffocating. Derek's smile returned, but it was colder this time, like ice on steel. "Fine," he said smoothly. "If you won't come willingly, we'll do this another way." He stepped back toward the Escalade. "But make no mistake, sweetheart, I always get what I want." The car roared to life, tires spitting gravel as it tore back into the night. Jake exhaled slowly, lowering the bat. His heart was pounding, but his face was calm. He turned to Anna, who was shaking, tears glistening in her eyes. "He won't stop," she whispered. "He'll keep coming until he wins." Jake crouched in front of her, his hands steady on her shoulders. "Then we'll make sure he doesn't. You're not alone in this anymore, Anna. You have me, you have Noah, and together we'll fight him." Her tears spilled freely then, not just from fear, but from something deeper. The fragile, desperate hope that maybe, for the first time in her life, she wasn't standing alone. That night, Jake barely slept. He sat in the living room, bat across his lap, watching the window for headlights. His mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and fears. He wasn't a lawyer or a soldier. He was just a man who had already lost too much. But he knew one thing: Derek Whitmore would not take this family from him. The next morning, Jake drove into town and spoke with Sheriff Daniels, an old friend from high school. Daniels was a sturdy man with weathered hands and a skeptical gaze. Anonymous threats? Rich boys showing up at your house? Jake, you're in deep here, Daniel said, rubbing his chin. Men like Derek don't fight fair. I don't care how he fights, Jake said firmly. I just need to keep my family safe. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll keep an eye out. But you'd better be ready, Jake, because he tapped the note. This isn't just bluster. It's a promise. When Jake returned home, Anna was waiting on the porch, sunflowers from the market in a vase beside her. She looked fragile, but her eyes held a new kind of fire. Jake, she said quietly, I've been running for so long. Maybe it's time I stop. Maybe it's time I face him. Not alone, but with you. Jake swallowed hard, moved by her courage. Then we'll face him together. And in that simple vow, spoken under the Texas sun, a line was drawn. Derek had wealth, power, and influence. But Jake and Anna had something else, something Derek would never understand. Love. And love, when tested, could be stronger than any empire. The morning after Derek's visit felt different. The air itself seemed heavier, as if the Texas sky knew a storm was brewing. Jake stood at the kitchen counter, pouring himself a second cup of black coffee, trying to steady the restless churn in his chest. He wasn't a man prone to fear, but he was honest enough to recognize it when it clawed at him. Anna sat at the table, dressed in one of Jake's flannel shirts that hung loosely over her frame. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping to brush her cheeks. She looked tired, but there was a fragile determination in her eyes, a stubborn flame refusing to be snuffed out. You barely slept, she said softly, watching him. Jake shrugged, his voice rough. I've had worse nights. She tilted her head. That's not the same as saying you're okay. He met her gaze, and for a moment the truth passed silently between them. Neither of them was okay, but they were still standing. Noah thundered down the hallway then, his dinosaur pajamas flapping like capes. Daddy, Miss Anna, can we have pancakes today? His grin was wide, blissfully unaware of the tension thickening the air. Jake forced a smile. Pancakes it is, champ. For a little while, the kitchen filled with the comforting rhythm of normal life. The crack of eggs into a bowl, the sizzle of batter on the skillet, Noah's giggles as he tried to flip a pancake with exaggerated seriousness. And though Anna's laugh was faint, it was real, and it stitched something steady into Jake's heart. But normal never lasted long. That afternoon, a knock came at the door. Jake opened it to find a man in a sharp suit holding a leather briefcase. His smile was polite, but his eyes were cold. Mr. Miller? The man asked. That's me. The man extended a crisp envelope. You've been served. Jake frowned, glancing down at the envelope stamped with official seals. The man turned on his heel and walked away before Jake could ask anything more. Anna wheeled herself closer, her face blanching when she saw the envelope. What is it? Jake tore it open. His eyes scanned the neat legal jargon until the words sharpened into meaning. Petition for custody. He swore under his breath. Derek wasn't just threatening anymore. He was going through the courts. Anna covered her mouth with a trembling hand. No, he wouldn't. He would, Jake said grimly, tossing the papers onto the table. He's trying to claim your baby before she's even born. Her voice broke. Jake, he can't. I won't let him. Jake crouched beside her chair, gripping her hands tightly. Then we fight. On his terms if we have to. But we don't roll over. Not for him, not for anyone. Anna's tears spilled, but there was steel in her voice when she whispered, together. The following week was a blur of courthouse visits, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Jake sat with Anna in the worn office of Marlene Brooks, a local attorney known for her no-nonsense grit. Her desk was cluttered with files, and she had a coffee mug that read, Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. Marlene skimmed through the papers Derek's lawyers had filed, her brow furrowing deeper with every page. This is a power play, she said flatly. He's not just after custody, he's trying to paint you as unfit. They're leaning on the accident, the wheelchair, the idea that you can't provide a stable environment. They're even dragging Jake into it, saying his income and background don't measure up to the child's supposed needs. Anna's face crumpled, but Jake's jaw hardened. They're twisting everything. That's what people with money do, Marlene said, her tone sharp but not unkind. But they don't scare me. We'll counter. We'll build a case that shows you're not alone, that you have a support system, that you're making choices for yourself and your baby. The court won't just hand a child over to the highest bidder. Not if we fight smart. Jake leaned forward. So we fight. Marlene nodded. But you'd better brace yourselves. Men like Derek don't back down easy. Back home, the weight of it all pressed harder than ever. Bills piled on the counter. Jake took every overtime shift he could, but exhaustion carved deeper lines into his face. Anna tried to contribute, spending long evenings filling out documents, making lists, and gathering every scrap of evidence that proved she was capable. But at night, when the house grew quiet, Jake often found her crying silently in her room. She always tried to hide it, pressing a pillow to her face, but he knew. He knew because he'd cried the same way once, after his wife passed, when grief was too heavy to speak aloud. One night, he sat beside her as she wiped her eyes. "You don't have to carry this alone," he murmured. "I feel like I'm breaking," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, you're bending maybe, but you're not breaking. I've seen what breaking looks like, and this—" He gently touched her hand. "This is strength." Her breath caught, and for a fleeting moment, she leaned her head against his shoulder. The first court hearing arrived on a gray Monday morning. Jake drove them to San Antonio in his old Explorer, the hum of the engine steady but strained. Noah stayed with a neighbor, leaving the three of them, Jake, Anna, and Marlene, standing in a cavernous courtroom that smelled faintly of old wood and polished marble. Derek was already there, flanked by two high-priced attorneys in tailored suits. His smirk was intact, smug, and confident. When his eyes landed on Jake, his grin widened, as if to say, "This is my world. You don't belong here." The judge entered, and proceedings began. Derek's lawyers painted Anna as irresponsible, unstable, incapable of caring for a child given her injury. They suggested Jake was an unfit influence, citing his modest income and lack of appropriate social standing. Their words dripped with condescension, polished to sound professional but meant to wound. Jake's fist clenched under the table, but Marlene was ready. She countered with medical reports showing Anna's progress, letters from neighbors praising her kindness, and photos of her reading to Noah, smiling despite her pain. She emphasized not wealth but love, not status but commitment. By the time they left the courthouse, no decisions had been made, but the battle lines were drawn. Derek's power was real, but so was their resolve. Outside on the courthouse steps, Anna's face was pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. "He won't stop," she said quietly. Jake slipped his hand into hers, rough fingers closing around hers gently but firmly. "Then neither will we." And though the road ahead stretched long and brutal, Jake knew one thing for certain. They were in this together. That night, as they returned to their small house, Noah ran to the door, waving his dinosaur and shouting, "You're back! Did we win?" Anna knelt as best she could, pulling him into her arms, tears spilling freely now. But this time they weren't just fear. They were love, determination, hope. "Noah," she whispered into his hair, "we're still fighting. But with you and your daddy, we're stronger than they know." Jake stood in the doorway watching them, his heart swelling. For the first time in a long while, he believed it. And somewhere deep inside, he knew. No matter what Derek threw at them, money, lawyers, threats, they had something he could never buy: a family. The weeks after the first hearing felt like walking a tightrope. Every day was balanced between ordinary routines, Noah's school projects, dinners around the small wooden table, evenings on the porch, and the looming weight of Derek's shadow. Jake did his best to keep life steady. He worked double shifts at the warehouse, drove Anna to medical checkups, and read bedtime stories with Noah until his son fell asleep against his chest. But beneath the normalcy, tension simmered. He could see it in Anna's eyes when she caught an unfamiliar car slowing by the house, in the way her shoulders stiffened whenever the phone rang. Derek hadn't given up. If anything, the court case had only sharpened his determination. It started small. Jake's supervisor at the warehouse pulled him aside one Friday afternoon. "Jake," the man said uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck, "I hate to even bring this up, but corporate's been getting calls, anonymous complaints about your work, safety issues, missed quotas, stuff I know ain't true, but—" Jake's stomach sank. "But it's on record now." The supervisor sighed. "I'll vouch for you. You're one of my best guys. But if they push hard enough, my hands will be tied." Jake drove home with a knot in his gut. He didn't have proof, but he didn't need it. Derek was pulling strings, trying to destabilize him, chip away at the ground beneath his feet. When he told Anna that night, she buried her face in her hands. "This is what he does. He won't just fight in court. He'll make your whole life collapse until you can't stand beside me anymore." Jake reached across the table, lifting her chin until she met his gaze. "Then he'll have to work harder." Because I'm not going anywhere. A few nights later, the threat grew bolder. It was past midnight when Jake woke to the sound of tires crunching on gravel. He grabbed the baseball bat from beside the bed and crept to the front window. Headlights swept across the living room wall, then vanished. The sound of an engine revved, and suddenly the sickening screech of rubber against pavement split the night. Jake yanked open the front door in time to see his mailbox flatten, the Escalade's taillights disappearing into the dark. Anna wheeled into the hallway, her face pale. What was it? Jake clenched his jaw, lowering the bat. Message sent. She shivered. Jake, this is only going to get worse. He stepped to her side, pressing a steady hand over hers, then let it. He wants us scared. He wants us broken. We don't give him that. But as he looked at her, at the baby growing inside her, Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier than ever. The next morning, he patched the mailbox back together with duct tape and determination. Neighbors noticed. Mrs. McAllister from down the street brought over a pie and whispered, People talk, Jake. They say the Whitmores don't like losing, but folks here know you. We stand with you. It wasn't much, but it was something. Small-town loyalty could be stubborn when tested. At home, Anna tried to keep busy. She baked muffins with Noah, taught him how to fold paper cranes, and even convinced Jake to let her handle some of the bills. But beneath the soft rhythm of daily life, guilt gnawed at her. One evening, as Jake fixed a loose hinge on the porch door, Anna rolled up beside him. I need to say something. He glanced at her. Shoot. Her hands twisted in her lap. I keep thinking, maybe I should go back. Maybe if I give Derek what he wants, he'll leave you and Noah alone. Jake froze, then set the screwdriver down with deliberate care. He turned to her, his eyes fierce. Don't you ever say that again. Tears welled in her eyes. But I'm dragging you into a war you didn't ask for. He crouched in front of her, voice low but steady. Anna, listen to me. I lost my wife 3 years ago. I know what it feels like to have your whole world ripped away. And when I found you at that gas station, something in me woke up. You and that baby, you're not a burden. You're a second chance. And I'll be damned if I let Derek take that away. Her breath caught, and for the first time in weeks, her tears weren't just from fear. She reached out, and Jake covered her trembling hand with his calloused one. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was tender, hopeful. The second court hearing was worse than the first. Derek's attorneys paraded witness after witness, business associates who praised his stability, doctors who claimed Anna's injury made motherhood unsafe, even a hired expert who questioned Jake's financial stability. Marlene fought back fiercely, presenting testimony from neighbors and teachers who described Anna's nurturing spirit, Jake's steady presence, and Noah's thriving under their care. But the tension was brutal. When Derek took the stand, he played his part flawlessly. Polished, charming, concerned. He spoke of duty and responsibility, painting himself as the victim of Anna's recklessness. Jake sat stiffly, fists clenched, as Derek looked directly at Anna and said, I only want what's best for our child. Anna's quiet whisper carried across the courtroom. Liar. That night, back at the house, Jake found Anna sitting by Noah's bed, stroking his hair as he slept. Her face was pale, her eyes distant. He's winning, she whispered when Jake stepped into the room. I can feel it. The judge listens to him. Everyone listens to him. Jake sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to wake Noah. Then we make them listen to us louder. He has money. He has lawyers. But we have truth. We have love. And people see that even if it takes time. Her gaze flicked to him, uncertain but searching. Do you really believe that? I do, he said firmly, because I've seen it. When you laugh with Noah, when you hold him like he's your own, when you stand up to Derek even though you're scared, you're stronger than anyone in that courtroom. Her lips trembled, but a faint smile broke through. You always know what to say. Not always, he admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But I know this. I'm not letting him win. 2 nights later, Jake came home late from a shift and found his front door ajar. His heart slammed in his chest. He burst inside, bat raised, calling, Anna! Noah! Anna wheeled out from the hallway, her face pale. Noah clung to her side, wide-eyed but unharmed. On the kitchen table lay another envelope. Inside was a single ultrasound photo, Anna's baby, scrawled across it in black ink. Mine. Anna gasped, clutching her stomach as if shielding her child from the violation. Jake's hands shook with fury. He slammed the photo onto the table, voice trembling with rage. He crossed the line. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Jake, what do we do? He looked at her, then at Noah, then back at the photo. His voice was steel when he answered. We fight harder. No more waiting for him to come to us. It's time we take the fight to him. And though fear still lingered in Anna's eyes, something else sparked there too. Trust. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving Derek's games. She was ready to stand with Jake and fight. The ultrasound photo still sat on the kitchen table, its edges curling under the weight of Jake's clenched fist. Every time he walked past it, his chest tightened with rage. Derek hadn't just crossed the line, he'd stomped on it, daring them to respond. Jake wasn't a man who liked playing games, but he knew when it was time to stop absorbing punches and start swinging back. That morning, he called Sheriff Daniels. Jake, the sheriff said, his voice weary but firm, I told you Derek doesn't play fair. If he's leaving stuff in your house, that means he's got people watching you. Could be someone on his payroll nearby. Could be someone bribed. You need to tighten things up. I don't want to just tighten up, Jake growled into the receiver. I want to push back. I want proof, something that shows the court who he really is. Daniels was quiet for a long moment. There's talk around town. Derek's got skeletons. He always has. But his money keeps the dirt buried. If you're serious about digging, you'll need someone who knows where to look. Who? Old friend of mine, Tommy Greer. Used to work corporate security before he got fed up and opened a private PI outfit. He's good at finding what people don't want found. I'll give him your number. Jake hung up, relief and anxiety twisting together. He wasn't used to this world of investigators and legal maneuvers. But if Derek wanted to fight dirty, they needed someone who could wade into the mud without drowning. Later that afternoon, Jake sat with Anna on the porch, explaining the plan. The Texas sun hung low, painting the yard in streaks of gold. Anna listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her face thoughtful but tense. So, we'd be hiring someone to dig into Derek's life? She asked carefully. Jake nodded. If he's got secrets, and I'd bet my paycheck he does, then it's time they came to light. We can't just keep reacting. We need to hit him where it hurts. Her eyes searched his. Jake, what if it backfires? What if he finds out and doubles down? Jake leaned forward, his voice low but steady. Anna, he's already all in. He's sabotaging my job, vandalizing our house, threatening our family. The only way to stop a bully like him is to show the world what he really is. She hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. Then let's do it. Let's fight. It was the first time she'd said the word without flinching, and it sent a spark of determination through Jake's veins. 2 days later, Tommy Greer showed up. He was nothing like Jake expected. Grizzled, mid-50s, with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and a battered Stetson, he seemed to wear more out of habit than style. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp and calculating. Daniel said you're in a bind, Tommy said, stepping into the living room and scanning the place like he was already cataloging threats. You could say that, Jake replied. Anna wheeled forward, her voice polite but edged with suspicion. And you think you can help us? Tommy gave a wry smile. Ma'am, I spent 20 years cleaning up messes for men like Derek Whitmore. Rich boys who thought the rules didn't apply to them. I know the games they play, and I know where they hide their dirt. If you're asking if I can help, yeah. Question is, are you ready for what I might dig up? Jake and Anna exchanged a glance. She nodded slowly. We're ready. The next weeks were a blur of whispered phone calls, quiet meetings, and tense waiting. Tommy worked in the shadows, following Derek's movements, talking to old contacts, digging into financial records. Every time the phone rang, Jake felt his pulse spike. Meanwhile, life at home went on. Noah had a science project due, and Anna spent hours helping him build a solar system out of styrofoam balls and fishing wire. Jake would come home from work to find them both covered in paint, laughter echoing through the house. Those moments, bright, ordinary, precious, were the anchor that kept him steady. But at night, when the house grew quiet, he'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Tommy might find and whether it would be enough. One Thursday evening, Tommy showed up unannounced, dropping a thick folder onto the kitchen table. His expression was grim, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Found something, he said. Jake opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and a series of photographs. Derek's been laundering money through shell companies, Tommy explained. Offshore accounts, shady land deals. Nothing your average person could spot, but I've seen this pattern before. It's fraud, plain and simple. If we get this in front of the right people, Derek's credibility in court will tank. He might even face charges. Anna's hand flew to her mouth. Are you sure? Tommy nodded. Positive. But here's the catch. You can't just throw this on the judge's desk and expect fireworks. You need timing, leverage, and guts. Jake's heart pounded. This was it, the weapon they needed. We'll use it, he said firmly. We'll show the court who he really is. That night after Tommy left, Jake and Anna sat at the table long after Noah was asleep. The folder opened between them. This could change everything, Anna whispered. Jake nodded. It will. Her eyes softened, lingering on his. Jake, I never thought I'd find someone willing to risk so much for me. For us. He reached across the table, taking her hand. You don't have to thank me. This is what family does. Her lips trembled, but she smiled through the tears. Family. It was the first time she'd said the word like it belonged to her, and the sound of it lit something warm and unshakable in Jake's chest. But victories, even small ones, came with consequences. 2 days later, Jake came home from the warehouse to find his supervisor waiting at the time clock. The man looked uncomfortable, scratching at the back of his neck. Jake, I've got to let you go, he said reluctantly. Corporate says your file's too messy now, too many complaints. I fought for you, but Jake's gut twisted. He knew whose fingerprints were on this. Driving home, fury simmered under his skin. Derek was striking back, harder than ever. But instead of despair, Jake felt something else rising. Resolve. Derek had taken his job, tried to strip his dignity, but Jake still had his family. And with Tommy's evidence, they finally had a weapon. When he walked through the front door, Anna looked up from the couch, worry etched in her face. What happened? Jake dropped his work badge on the table. He got me fired. Her breath caught, but before she could speak, Jake crossed the room, kneeling in front of her. His voice was steady, fierce. But listen to me. We've got something stronger than his money. We've got truth, and we're going to use it. He doesn't get to win, Anna, not this time. She stared at him, her eyes filling, and for the first time, her fear gave way to something stronger. Belief. Together, they weren't just surviving anymore. They were preparing to fight back. And Derek Whitmore had no idea how much stronger they'd become. The folder of evidence sat hidden in a locked drawer under Jake's bed. Every time he looked at it, he felt both relief and dread. Relief because it was the key to exposing Derek. Dread because Derek wasn't the type to go down without dragging everyone else through hell first. And he was right. It started with whispers. Noah came home from school one afternoon quieter than usual, his sneakers dragging against the kitchen floor. He dropped his backpack and sat it at the table without a word. Anna wheeled over, concern etched across her face. Hey, buddy, rough day? Noah's lip trembled. Kids said, you're not my real family. Said my daddy's gonna lose me in court. That some rich man's gonna take me away. Jake froze mid-step, the hair on the back of his neck rising. He crouched beside his son, heart aching at the sight of tears streaking his small, flushed cheeks. Listen to me, Noah, he said firmly, his voice gentle but steady. Nobody is taking you away. You hear me? Nobody. Noah nodded, but his eyes still glistened with confusion and fear. Jake looked at Anna, whose face was pale, stricken. Derek's reach was spreading, seeping even into Noah's safe spaces. 2 nights later, the threat grew sharper. Jake came home late from running errands and saw it immediately. Spray paint across his garage door. Red, dripping letters that shouted, "Unfit father." He gritted his teeth, fury surging through his veins. Neighbors peeked from their porches, whispering, but none dared come close. Jake grabbed a bucket, scrubbing in silence long past midnight until the hateful words faded into ghostly smears. Anna came outside, wrapped in a blanket, her hair loose around her shoulders. Jake, she whispered, her voice breaking. He won't stop. He's trying to break you. Jake dropped the sponge, water splashing across his boots. He turned to her, jaw tight, eyes blazing. Let him try. He'll run out of paint before I run out of fight. But deep down, the pressure was mounting. A week later, the worst blow landed. It was a Saturday afternoon, bright and deceptively peaceful. Jake and Anna were in the backyard watching Noah chase the neighbor's dog. Laughter filled the air, sweet and unburdened. For a moment, it felt normal. Then a black SUV rolled slowly down the street. Jake's stomach dropped as the tinted window lowered. A man in sunglasses leaned out, holding a camera. Click, click, click. He snapped photos of Noah, then of Anna in her wheelchair. then of Jake standing stiff and furious. Jake charged toward the street, fists clenched. "Hey, you get the hell out of here!" The SUV peeled away, tires squealing. Noah froze mid-laugh, confusion and fear written across his face. "Daddy, who was that?" Jake's voice shook with restrained fury. "Nobody you need to worry about, champ. Go inside with Anna." But Jake knew exactly who it was. Derek wasn't just circling anymore. He was gathering ammunition. That evening, Jake sat at the kitchen table, the same table where so many battles had been planned. His hands gripped the edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. "This ends," he muttered. Anna studied him, her expression torn between fear and admiration. "Jake, if you go after him, really go after him, he'll retaliate. Harder." Jake met her gaze. "Then let him. I'd rather fight fire with fire than watch him scare my boy and tear our lives apart piece by piece." Her lips trembled. "I'm scared for you." "I know," he said softly, "but I'm more scared of what happens if we do nothing." For a moment, the silence between them was heavy, but then Anna reached across the table, her hand finding his. "Then we fight together, no matter how ugly it gets." Her voice shook, but the resolve in her eyes was unshakable. The next court hearing was brutal. Derek's attorneys presented glossy photos of Noah playing in the yard, framed to suggest negligence. They insinuated that Jake's long hours left the boy unsupervised. They painted Anna as fragile, incapable of providing structure. Jake wanted to leap across the table and tear their lies apart with his bare hands. But Marlene kept him grounded. When it was her turn, she countered with testimony from teachers, neighbors, and even Sheriff Daniels, who spoke of Jake's integrity and Anna's devotion. But the damage was done. The judge's expression was unreadable, and when the gavel finally fell, Jake knew the war was far from over. Back at home, tension crackled through the air. Noah had gone to bed early, sensing the heaviness in the house. Anna sat at the kitchen table, her face in her hands. "I can't do this," she whispered. Jake's chest tightened. "Anna." She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Every time I see him, every time his name comes up, I feel like I'm drowning. And now Noah's caught in it. What if he gets hurt, Jake? What if Derek takes him away too?" Jake knelt beside her, his voice raw but steady. "Listen to me. Derek might have money, power, connections, but he doesn't have what we do. He doesn't have love. He doesn't have family. And no matter how hard he tries, he'll never break that." Her eyes searched his, desperate for belief. And slowly she nodded, gripping his hand as if it were the only thing tethering her to solid ground. Later that night, Jake stood at the window, staring out at the quiet street. His reflection in the glass looked older, wearier but also sharper, like steel forged in fire. Anna rolled up beside him, silent for a moment before whispering, "Do you ever regret finding me that night at the gas station?" Jake turned, stunned. "Regret?" Her voice broke. "If you hadn't stopped, you wouldn't be in this mess. You'd still have your ba. You'd be safe with Noah." Jake cupped her face, his rough thumb brushing away a tear. "Anna, listen to me. That night was the first time in 3 years I felt alive again. You and that baby, you gave me something worth fighting for. I don't regret it. Not for a second." Her breath caught, her tears spilling freely now, and for the first time she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. In the silence of that small Texas living room, with threats swirling outside and fear gnawing at their walls, a fragile but undeniable truth rooted itself deeper. They weren't just surviving Derek anymore. They were becoming stronger because of him. And Derek, so blinded by his own arrogance, had no idea that his relentless pressure was forging something he couldn't destroy. A family that refused to break. The days after Derek's photographer showed up outside their yard felt like living under siege. Jake could feel Anna's tension in the way she double-checked the locks every night, in the way Noah clung a little tighter when he hugged him before bed. The house that once felt like a sanctuary was beginning to feel like a bunker. But Jake had made a decision. He wasn't waiting for Derek to make the next move. It was time to fight back. He called Tommy Greer on a muggy Tuesday morning. "Tell me you've got more," Jake said without preamble. Tommy's voice was gravelly over the line. "Oh, I've got more. Your boy Whitmore's been real sloppy lately, a little too confident. He's got payments going to a construction project in Houston that doesn't exist. Money funneling into offshore accounts under shell corporations with names that don't check out. It's fraud, Jake. Clear as day." Jake's grip on the phone tightened. "Can we prove it?" "I've got enough to raise eyebrows," Tommy said. "But to bury him? We'll need to time it right. Courts love facts, but they love spectacle too. We drop this evidence when he least expects it, when he's standing there, smug and certain he's already won. That's when it'll hit hardest. Jake exhaled, his chest heavy with cautious hope. Then we wait, and when the time comes, we nail him. That evening, Jake sat at the table with Anna, spreading the documents Tommy had gathered. Anna's hands trembled as she flipped through them. Bank transfers, photographs, notarized statements. "This is enough to ruin him," she whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. Jake nodded. "It's enough to show the court who he really is. Not the polished man in the suit, but the fraud, the liar, the abuser." Her eyes lifted to his, brimming with emotion. "Jake, what if this doesn't work? What if he twists it like he twists everything else?" Jake reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. "Then we keep fighting. But Anna, for the first time, we've got more than just hope. We've got proof." The third hearing came on a gray Thursday morning. The courthouse loomed tall and austere, its marble columns gleaming under the overcast sky. Jake wore his best shirt, clean, pressed, though still modest. Anna sat beside him, dressed in a soft navy blouse, her hair pulled back, her eyes steady but haunted. Derek was already there, as polished as ever. His suit was immaculate, his tie expensive, his smirk rehearsed. He looked at Jake and Anna like they were children stumbling into a grown man's game. When the session began, Derek's attorneys attacked relentlessly. They painted Jake as unstable, recently unemployed, unable to provide for his household. They painted Anna as fragile, physically incapable, emotionally compromised. They presented glossy photos of Noah playing outside with the caption "unsupervised," twisting innocence into negligence. Anna sat rigid, her nails digging into her palms, but Jake kept his jaw tight, waiting for their moment. Finally, Marlene Brooks rose, her presence sharp and unflinching. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear, "before we continue down this path of character assassinations, I have evidence that bears directly on Mr. Whitmore's credibility." Derek's head snapped toward her, his smirk faltering for the first time. Marlene held up the folder Tommy had prepared. "This documentation details fraudulent business dealings tied directly to Mr. Whitmore. Bank records, shell corporations, payments for projects that do not exist. These documents have been verified by a licensed investigator with decades of experience. We respectfully request this evidence be entered into the record." The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he scanned the initial pages. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Derek's attorneys scrambled, objecting, but the judge silenced them with a sharp rap of the gavel. "Objection noted," the judge said firmly, "and overruled. This evidence will be reviewed." Derek's face flushed, his polished composure cracking. He leaned toward his attorneys, whispering furiously, but for the first time he wasn't in control. Anna's hand slipped into Jake's, squeezing tightly. He glanced at her, and the look in her eyes made every sleepless night, every moment of fear, worth it. After the hearing, Derek stormed out of the courtroom, his jaw tight, his swagger dulled. Reporters outside shouted questions, flashing cameras in his face. His once slick grin faltered under the weight of the flashing bulbs. Jake and Anna stepped into the sunlight together, their attorney at their side. The air smelled sweeter, lighter, though the battle wasn't finished yet. "That rattled him," Marlene said as they walked down the courthouse steps. "But don't get comfortable. A man like Derek doesn't crumble quietly. He'll come back swinging." Jake nodded grimly. "Let him. We'll be ready." That night, back at the house, Anna sat on the porch with a cup of tea in her hands. The cicadas hummed in the trees, and the Texas stars blinked faintly above. Jake joined her, lowering himself onto the step beside her. "I saw his face today," Anna murmured. "For the first time, he looked scared." Jake leaned back, gazing at the horizon. "Good, about time he knew what it feels like." She turned toward him, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "Jake, you've given me something I never thought I'd have again. A chance, a home, a family." His chest tightened. He reached over, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You gave me the same thing, Anna. After everything I lost, I thought life was just about surviving. Then you showed up, and suddenly, it felt like living again." Her lips parted, her breath catching. And in that quiet, tender moment, the distance between them dissolved. She leaned forward, and Jake met her halfway. The kiss was smooth and trembling, but full of everything they'd been carrying: fear, hope, love, and the stubborn belief that together they could weather anything. When they pulled apart, Anna's smile was small but radiant. Whatever happens next, I'm not afraid. Not as long as I have you. Jake rested his forehead against hers, his voice low and steady. You've got me, always. But even as they sat there, wrapped in the fragile warmth of newfound hope, the storm wasn't over. Because Derek Whitmore, humiliated in court and exposed to the public eye, was more dangerous than ever. And Jake knew, deep in his gut, that the fight of their lives was still ahead. The courthouse buzzed with tension on the day of the final hearing. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing as if they sensed blood in the water. Derek Whitmore's name had already started to make headlines after Marlene introduced Tommy's evidence. Words like fraud, corruption, and cover-up were circling, and the once flawless image of the Whitmore family was beginning to crack. Jake parked the old Explorer a block away, his palms slick against the steering wheel. He looked in the rearview mirror at Noah, who sat clutching his green stuffed dinosaur, eyes wide. "Daddy," the boy whispered, "is today the day we win?" Jake swallowed hard. He wanted to give his son certainty, but the truth was heavier than that. He reached back, ruffling Noah's hair. "Today's the day we fight with everything we've got." Beside him, Anna sat tall in her wheelchair, dressed in a simple cream blouse and blazer that made her look both elegant and unshakable. Her hand found Jake's, squeezing with quiet strength. "No matter what happens," she murmured, "thank you for giving me a family again." Jake looked at her, his chest aching. "No, Anna, thank you for giving me a reason to believe again." Inside the courtroom, Derek looked rattled. The polish was still there, the expensive suit, the practiced grin, but it no longer reached his eyes. He sat stiffly between his lawyers, his jaw tight, his composure thinning under the weight of exposure. When the hearing began, his attorneys tried to recover lost ground. They argued that Derek's wealth and connections would provide unparalleled stability for Anna's unborn child. They pointed to Jake's recent job loss as proof of instability, spinning every fact into a weapon. But then Marlene rose, calm and deliberate, the folder of evidence in her hand. She spoke with precision, unveiling Derek's fraudulent deals piece by piece. Bank records, shell corporations, offshore accounts. Each revelation cut deeper, and Derek's face reddened with fury he could no longer conceal. "Your Honor," Marlene concluded, her voice sharp, "this case is not about wealth. It is about character. Mr. Whitmore has shown himself to be manipulative, deceitful, and unfit to hold authority over anyone, least of all a child. My clients, on the other hand, have shown resilience, love, and an unshakable commitment to building a stable, nurturing home. That is what matters most here. Not money, not power. Love." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned back, thoughtful, his gavel resting idle in his hand. Derek stood suddenly, slamming his palms against the table. "This is a farce," he shouted, his voice breaking through the silence. "You think you can ruin me with a few papers? You think anyone cares about this small-town sob story? I own this court. I own this city." Gasps rippled through the room. His attorneys tugged at his sleeve, hissing for him to sit. But he shook them off, his face contorted with rage. Anna lifted her chin, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "That's who you really are, Derek. Not a father, not a partner, just a man who thinks people are possessions. And you don't own me. You don't own this child. And you sure as hell don't own this family." Her words landed like a strike. For the first time, Derek looked small, his power crumbling in the light of truth. The judge cleared his throat, his voice steady. "This court will not be intimidated by money, power, or threats. Based on the evidence presented, custody claims by Mr. Whitmore are dismissed. Furthermore, given the financial irregularities, this matter will be referred for criminal investigation." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed, shouting Derek's name, cameras flashing like fireworks. But the man who once commanded attention slunk away, his head low, his empire unraveling in real time. Jake stood with Anna and Noah on the steps, the sunlight breaking through the gray clouds above. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. Anna's hand slipped into his, her smile trembling, but radiant. "We did it," she whispered. Jake looked at her, then at Noah, who clutched his dinosaur with a triumphant grin. His chest swelled with pride. "No, Anna, you did it. You stood up to him. You showed him you weren't afraid anymore." Tears streaked down her cheeks, but they were tears of release, not despair. She leaned against him, her voice soft but sure. No, we did it, together. Life didn't magically become easy after that day. Bills still piled up, Jake still had to search for steady work, and Anna still faced the daily challenges of recovery and motherhood. But the weight of fear was gone, replaced by something far stronger. At home, the laughter returned. Noah's giggles filled the hallways again. Anna began to prepare for the baby with a joy she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Folding tiny clothes, painting the nursery walls a soft shade of yellow, and smiling more freely than Jake had ever seen. On a warm evening weeks later, Jake sat on the porch as Anna joined him, her belly round with the nearing arrival. The Texas stars stretched across the sky, vast and comforting. You ever think about that night at the gas station? She asked softly. Jake smiled faintly. Every day. It's the night that gave me my life back. Anna's eyes shone. Me too. They sat in silence then, the quiet not heavy but peaceful, like the calm after a long storm. When Noah wandered out, climbing onto Jake's lap, Anna reached for his hand. Together they looked out at the wide Texas sky, knowing that whatever the future held, it would be if ours own, they would face it as a family. And that was the truth Derek could never understand. Love wasn't about contracts or control. It was about sacrifice, resilience, and the courage to stand together, no matter how fierce the storm. Question for the audience. If you were in Jake's shoes, an ordinary parent fighting against someone powerful and ruthless, would you have had the courage to keep standing your ground, even when it put everything at risk?